we're going to do today is going to, you need it, right? Okay, so in today's meeting, we're going to look at the a simple class data that has student's name, the student ID, their gender, the program they are in for, the level, attendance, CA score, and exam score, right? So this data already exists in our institution. So we're assuming we're in a particular institution. So this data already exists, and we want to get insight from this data. Ordinarily, this data doesn't make sense. Looking at this particular data set doesn't make sense. So we want to make sense of this data. Now, this scenario can be beyond an educational setting. It can be in a fintech. So you have like the financial data, it can be in a bank, can be in a tech firm where you have data. So it can be in a hospital where you have health data, it can be anywhere, right? So, but in this case, we're just using educational data, for example, right? So we're going to use this sample data to look at some of the features of the spreadsheet program, the Excel program, and how we can use it to create an interactive presentation, right? So that's what we're going to do. So our class for today will be divided into 3. So what we're going to do is we're dividing into 3 in the sense that we have the data, which is what we have here, what you're seeing in my screen, and I'm of the assumption that everybody's seeing my screen. So we have data. That's the first phase. We're going to try to manipulate this data, see what we can do to this data. Now the next thing is our pivot tables. So that's an important thing. I think I mentioned it last time, but I didn't talk about it. I said it's key, but we're going to look at it today. So we're going to look at the next phase, which is our pivot table or our pivot data, and then we'll now look at our presentation, the actual presentation, how we can present this data so that people can understand, right? So looking at this Excel file that we have here, that has these columns and rows. Beyond you as the analyst, someone else might not understand it. Somebody that is not in your area or your field might not understand this data. So creating this dashboard or presenting this data is what is important, right? So, and the Excel software to help us do that, and we're going to follow along step by step. So like I said, the first thing we're going to do is to see how we can manipulate this data. All right. So there are 2 things we can do. We would look at if the data is clean or not, right? So, but looking at the data is already clean. It's just a simple data. It's about 41 rows and about 8 or 9 columns. I'm not sure, right? So that's what we have here for this particular data. And since it's an academic record for each of the students that we have in this institution, we have the first column here, which is student ID. So if you register in school, each student has a unique ID, student name, the gender, the program they are in for, the level, attendance, percentage attendance that they've had, and the CA score and the exam score, right? So that's the data that we have. So let's see. This data can either be clean or unclean, but in this case it's clean, right? So let's try something. I can decide to do this, change engineering to ENG, change this one to ENG, right? Now, by changing this, you see that this data is no longer consistent in this part. It's no longer consistent. So we have engineering, but then we have a place where it's called engineering, but it's called ENG. Now, the problem with this thing is that when you're trying to analyze it or when you're trying to visualize your data, you get something that is indeterminate, right? something that is not really, it's not make sense. It's not going to be true. It's not going to be correct because you're not having too many data points. Ideally, in the program, what we have is computer science, law, medicine, and engineering. Computer science, law, medicine, and engineering, which is 4. But ENG now makes it 5. But ideally, ENG is supposed to be engineering. So if you come across a data set like this, you just look at, oh, what is wrong? You have ENG and then you have engineering. So you decide what consistency you want to, what convention you want to stick to, right? So in this case, we want to leave it as engineering, right? So I'm going to use the find and replace. That is the easiest. I recommend people to do that. So there's something called find and replace, right? So if you go to the this ribbon here, you're going to see you see find and select actually. But when you click on this drop down, you're going to see find, you're going to see replace. We're looking for replace, right? So I'm going to click on replace. Now, when I click on replace, a pop-up would come out. You might not see that pop-up. Um, you will not see it. So quickly let me quickly show that pop-up. Okay. Fortunately, it's not showing, but when you go to find and replace, right? If you click on find and replace, you're going to see a pop-up and you say find what and replace with. So we want to replace ENG with engineering. So I'm going to find ENG, right? And I'm going to replace it with engineering. I'm going to replace all. So you click on replace all. And then we're good. Okay. So that's one easy way to do it. All right. But in this case, the data is consistent. Okay, I'll take questions after I'm done with the raw data. So if you have questions, just hold the questions, memorize them, and I'll take them after I'm done with manipulating the raw data. Thank you very much. Like I said, it's 3 categories. We're going to manipulate this data set that we have here. We're going to look at our pivots, and then we'll now present our insights that we've gotten from the data. All right. So now what are we doing with this data? Like I said, ideally it's consistent. So there's really nothing much to manipulate here. But then we need to add something called, so if you're, some of us are familiar with Power BI, right? But if you're familiar with data analysis, there's something called calculated columns. Calculated columns. Now, calculated columns are important because they are columns that help you generate your data output or your performance indicators. So if you're looking for performance indicators, that's where you get your reference from. If you're going to be getting your pivot data, those are where you're going to be getting it from. So we're going to create some calculated columns. Now, what are those calculated columns? Now, if you look at this particular data set, you discover that it's not complete. You have CA score and then you have exam score. If you have those two, what then becomes the total score? So it means that each student needs a total score. That's one. And then each student need a grade. So a student that scores 18 in their CA and then scores 70 in their exams would need a grade. That student either get an A or a B or a C or a D. And then the next thing is that student eligible to pass or not? So those are the things we're going to be looking at. So it means that we're creating 3 calculated columns. Now, those 3 calculated columns are the totals, actually 4. the total score, right? The grade, then the status of that student, if it's pass or fail, and eligibility. If the student is eligible or not for the next academic session. So those are the things we're going to be doing. So just follow along with me as with this. I'm going to try as much as possible to be slow, right? So like I said, we're going to start with the student's total score. So I'm going to say total score, right? Then I'm going to create another column called the student grade. Then I'll create another column called the status of the student, if the student passed or failed. Then I'm going to create another column called eligibility. Right. Okay, so yeah, eligibility. Okay. So these are the things I'm creating. I'm going to be creating. Now, in total score, this is where it gets interesting. So, okay, I'm going to put this out so it's a little bit interactive. Now, I want somebody to tell me what I'm supposed to do to get the total score of each student. Just one response and then we can continue. How do I get the total score for student one? Any idea? Okay, yeah.
To get the total score for student one, can just make use of equal sign,
Okay.
then sum,
Mm-hmm.
column.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm coming.
Yeah.
Column E, column F, G, and H. Then you
Okay.
close the bracket, then you enter to get the.
All right. Okay, that's good. That's interesting. That's correct. In the comment section, sum of CA plus exams, that's also correct. Okay, Priscilla, your hand is up. You can unmute and answer.
Okay, my own understanding, I guess you to get the total score, you click on equal to sign in the form in the calculating dashboard, and you click on G G2
Okay.
colon G colon H2.
Okay. All right. That's correct. Kind of. Kind of. Okay. I think I've gotten what I want. I'll take one more, just one more response, so I can see Miss Okon's hand is up. Okay. Unmute your mic and answer.
Okay, good evening, sir. It's a question actually. The
Oh, okay. Hold
column
on. Hold on. I'll take questions.
attendance, are we supposed to add it to get the total score?
Okay, is that a question? No, no, no. You don't need
Yes.
that. You don't need to add the
And
attendance.
because the first person said FGH and you said it's correct.
Yeah, he has an understanding of what we are
Okay.
doing,
All
right?
right,
Yeah,
sir.
so that's okay. Yeah, so people that said you add the CA score and the exam score, that's correct. That's kind of like the conventional method of getting your total score. So in school, normally they just add your CA with your exams to get your total, right? So that's basically what we're going to be doing, right? So in this case, we're going to do it in two ways. You can do it two ways, right? You can use either an existing function in Excel or you can use an operator. So I'm going to use the two methods to show us what we're trying to do. So I'm going to use the first one, which is the operator method. So the operator, I'm going to use the equality sign and the assignment operator. And then I'm going to just simply say, so remember that we have our CA score at column G, and then we have our exam score at column H, and the data starts at row 2. So it means that we're going to be having the quality sign G2, right, plus H2. So that's what we have. And then when I hit enter, I get it. So I've been able to get the total score for this particular student. Now, ideally, not even ideally, I mean, common sense will just tell me, not common sense. Normally, I'll just go ahead and start doing equal to this, equal to that for all columns. Then imagine if I had like a an existing data of about 150, 200. Would I be clicking on 200 cells? No, I won't be doing that, right? I'm going to quickly come here and ensure that I have this black plus sign here, or this black cross sign, as the case may be. And then I'm going to click on it, and then I'll drag. So by the time I drag, that particular operation gets applied to all the rows, right? To all the rows, all the students that exist here. So that's basically what's just happened, right? That's one way to do it. So you can either use the operator method to get your total score, or I can use the function method. So I'm going to use the sum function. I'm going to say sum of, so I'm going to open my parentheses, and then I'm trying to sum G2 and H2, right? So I'm going to say G2 and H2. Now I'll close my bracket. Now hit enter. So I get it. The same method I'll drag down up to the last data point, and I get all my data. So regardless of method you use, you still get the same result. So we've done the total score. So that's our first calculated column. Now the next calculated column is our grade. Now this one is very, very interesting. How do we get our grade? I remember last week when we talked about the grading. I don't know if I talked about grading, but I talked about something called conditional formatting, conditional functions or conditional statements, right? Where you will say that if a student scores a particular score, give them pass. If they score a particular score, give them fail. So that's what we're going to do here to get the grade. So we're going to be using the conditional function called the if, right? Now the if. So we're doing the grading system. Now in this case, our grading system is we're going to use the conventional Nigerian grading system that exists, which is 70 and above is an A, 60 to 69 is a B, 50 to 59 is a C, 40 to 49 is a D, and every other thing below 40 becomes an F, right? So that's what we're going to do today. In order for us to do that, we're going to use the conditional function or conditional formatting or conditional statement, as the case may be. Like I said, I'll take questions when I'm done with the calculated columns. Please, thank you very much. All right. So now, how do we do that, right? So like I said, we use the if statement. So just follow along with me. The first thing I'll do is to use my equality sign, right? So that Excel understands that this is a function I'm trying to create. I remember it's case sensitive, so always use capital letters. Please, always use uppercase rather. Remember, each time you write a function, it comes with parentheses, and everything inside the parentheses becomes an argument or a parameter, right? So the more functions you create, the more parentheses you open. So our first function is if, right? So we open the parentheses, and then what are we trying to format? We're saying that we want to look at, because it is the total score that we're going to use to get the grade of the student. So our focus will be at I, column I. Very important, column I. That's where our focus will be. So I'm going to say if I. Now remember that the data starts at row 2. So I'm going to say if I2, right, is greater than or equal to. So this is how you write greater than or equal to. So assessing two conditions. We're saying that if it's from 70, So it's greater than or equal to 70. So we're saying that if it's 70 or any value greater than 70, so 70, 71, 72, 73 and above, then we should give that student followed by a comma and then a string. Remember last time I said anything that is a text that you want to leave as a text, you put it in quotes. It's called a string. In quotes, we're going to say give that student an A. That is our first condition. When you're done, you enter a comma that, oh, this is the closing statement for that. Remember, we've done that. We're now going to say that again, because we have multiple conditions. I'm going to say if again, so I'll open my parentheses. Very important. Remember, I said each time you call a function, remember to always use a parenthesis after you call that function or that function name. Right. So I'm going to say if again the same I2 I2 is greater than or equal to 60. Right. Let's give that student, remember to always put in quotes, a B. And then we'll close with a comma. And then we'll look for the third function, the third condition that we're setting. But I'm now going to say if another parenthesis, open bracket, I2 is greater than or equal to 50, right? Comma, give that student a C. Remember to enter your comma again. And then we're going to do the last two. But I'm going to say if that student that has a total score in I2 is greater than or equal to, in this case, we've done 50, we're going to do 40. Remember to do your comma. Give that student a D. So in this case, we don't have E, so we'll just stick to F. Now, when we're done, remember, else. So everything beyond this, since there are no conditions existing, and provided, so when it checks this first condition, if, checks this second condition, if, checks this third condition, if, checks this fourth condition, if, then if none of these conditions are met, it will just perform the last action, which is F. That's basically how this works. And remember to always close your parentheses. So remember that we've opened first parenthesis, second parenthesis, third parenthesis, and the fourth parenthesis, right? So we're going to close them 1, 2, 3, 4, so that the open bracket is equal to the closed bracket, and then I'm going to hit enter. You see, this student gets an A. Now remember, I don't have to do this for all the other 39 students. All I have to do is to come to this point, this last edge of this cell here, and my cursor changes to a plus black plus sign. Then I'm going to click on it or hold it, and then I'll drag. So the moment I drag down to the last data point, I get all the grades for each student. That's so it does the job automatically. So if you check the next cell, it changes to I3. You check the next cell, it changes to I4, as the case may be. So that's how we do it for the grade, right? Now the next thing is status. In status, we want to tell if the student will pass or fail. Now this is very, very simple. Now, depending on the institution or depending on the organization, they have a threshold or a limit or the way they want to benchmark it. So, but in our case, we want it such that anything above 50 is pass and anything below 50 is fail, right? That's basically what we want to do, right? Some people would say, oh, anything below from 40 and above is pass. When I was in school, my department, if you get an E, you pass. Well, so now in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the equality sign. Remember, we are paying attention to I2, our total score. This is our total score. This is the very most important column now at the moment, because it's going to really determine what a student will get. So the status of that student is going to be pass or fail. If he or she scores gets a total score that is either above or below 50. So what we're going to do here, we're going to use the conditional function, which is the if. Remember, the if always comes with an open bracket or parenthesis, and then we're going to reference that cell that has the student's total score, which is I2, the first student. We're going to say that if I2 is greater than or equal to 50, remember to use your comma, and then provided is a text that we want to print there, we use a quote. Let's give that student a pass, and then we'll close it, and then you enter a comma. Remember, it's just one condition that was two conditions. So it's either this happens or the other one happens. So we don't need to set any if again, right? So it will check if it's 50 and above, gives him pass. Anything beyond that or anything less than 50, it will give it fail. So we don't have to write an if. All we just have to do is say quote fail, and then you close your bracket. You close it. See that this student gets a pass. So I don't have to do this for all the students as usual. I'll just come here, click, and then I will drag. And then you see that every student that gets, see the student that got a D failed. This one that got a D failed, like that. That's the next calculated column. So we're going to look at the last calculated column. I'm going to see if the student is eligible, right? So let's assume that, okay, we want to be offering scholarship in this institution, right? We want to give them scholarship, and we want to see the students are eligible for a particular scholarship. Now, not all students that passed are eligible for scholarship. So we're going to create a benchmark for students that are eligible for scholarship. So let's say students that score 75 and above are eligible for a scholarship. Pretty much the same thing, right? So we're going to come here in the eligibility column, and we're going to say if, remember to always use your quality sign, if. Now in this case, we're trying to look at we can either use the exam score, right, or we can use the attendance. So I just got an idea now. No, let's use attendance, because in some schools you are eligible, even if you pass, you are eligible for the next session if you have 75% attendance. Some schools do 70% attendance. So we're going to use the attendance for eligibility, right, or eligibility to sit for an exam. Now, our attendance is at F, column F. And the first cell in column F is at row 2, F2. So F2 will be our reference point. We're going to say that if attendance, that is F2, right, is either 75% or above, right, let's say that student is eligible. Then anything below 75 will not be eligible. So remember to use your comma all the time. Not eligible. All right. So close with your quotes and close with your bracket. Now this student is eligible because he got 92% attendance. So those people that always attend our classes on Mondays, this is how I used to do it too. I'll just do it and then send. That's how you know if you're eligible for a certificate or not, right? And then you can see that. See, even some students that pass are not, and they are not even eligible. See this one that passed, that got 64 in exam, and then got, that got 15 in exam and then 14 in CA, but had 70% attendance, was not eligible for whatever offer that comes. So this is basically how you can, the first phase. So we are done with our raw data. So with this now, we can begin to visualize, we can begin to present our data and see how we can get insight from it. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before I take questions is, this one is very important. Each time you're performing anything that looks like data analysis with your Excel or whatever tool you're going to be using in the future, always convert your spreadsheet or your workbook to a table is very important because it's the data. Like I said, data is just table that has rows and columns. So it's very important to convert your data to table, and that's what we're going to do today. So that, okay, I'll tell us why it's important just shortly. Now, how do you convert your data to table? You convert it by, first of all, selecting or highlighting all of your existing data, the data you have here. So we have 41 rows and columns stopped at L. That's what we've highlighted all of this data. And then you're going to see something called format as table. Format as table. I need to confirm if my screen is still showing. Format as table, right? So I'm going to click on this drop down here, format as table. I'll just use a simple style, like blue. Okay, let's use green, light green. I'm going to click on light green. And remember, it's very important. I don't know if you can see this. There's a pop-up that shows. Hold on, let me share my entire screen. Let me share my entire screen so that you see the pop-up. Okay, so can you see it now? There's the pop-up here. So let me start all over. So if I select my entire data and I come to format as table, if I click on format as table, I get this little drop down. Not very necessary, but let me choose this style here. And then this pop-up comes up. Now this pop-up is telling you that your table range, your data is starting from A1 down to L41. So that's the length of your data or the size of your data or the dimension of your data. So remember to always check this. Let this be checked. My table has headers. This is important because you want your graphs, your visualization tools to recognize that your table has header. So it will use those headers as a reference point when it wants to represent your data. So you select this when my table has headers and then click OK. By the time I click OK, see that it gets formatted and I can see that, oh, this table has headers. Now this is interesting because I can now format each column the way I want. I can filter each column. So there's a drop down here. You can see that I can filter the column. So we don't want to do all of that now. I can try to sort data by alphabet, but that's not the point. Now the point is we've been able to look at our raw data and we've converted our data to table. After now, we start enter our pivot and start visualizing. So I'm going to be taking questions now. So those people that have questions, if you have questions, unmute your mic and ask your question.
All right, sir. Good evening. Let me be the first to take this opportunity. Good evening, everyone. All right, my first question is when we were handling the drag, like after giving your Excel a command and then it has taken note of that and then you have to drag. Because I remember there was one time I was trying to like drag, but it did not copy the function, but it copied the exact number that is already there. Like 55 is what is there. Okay, we use like number sequence. I drag from 1 and I'm expecting it to take number sequence of 1 to 100, but instead of taking number sequence of 1 to 100, it takes 1 1 1 1 1. It just replicates what it has in the first column. I don't think I'm making sense.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Thank you for that. Let me answer your question before I take the next question. So yeah, I know what you're talking about, and it's a very common thing in Excel. So let me look for a random column here, right? So see something like, let's go to Z. In Z, I will click on 1. I'll type 1, right? I explained this in last week. There's how Excel works. It works in sequence. And sequence, the way sequence work is sequence uses logic. That logic can be addition of a whole number, addition of a fraction, or addition of whatever it is, but there's always an increment. Now, let me show you. See, now this is what you're saying. If I drag, I get 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Exactly. That's what's going to happen. Do you know why? Because what Excel is doing is looking at 1 as your first number and it's saying, okay, this is 1. But then ideally in the number system, it starts from 0. So it's going to say, okay, 1 plus nothing is 1. So it keeps adding 1 to 0. So it's going to say 1 plus 0 is 1, gives you the next number. That 1 plus the first number 0 is 1, gives you the next one. 1 plus 0 is 1, gives you the next one. 1 plus 0 is 1, gives you the next one. That's what it does. But then if I do 1 and then I do 2 here, and then I highlight these 2, see what Excel does. Or I even start from, if I come here and then if I highlight these 2, see what Excel does. Let's say, okay, there's 1 here and then there's 2. Now the difference is that this value is incrementing by 1. So it will add 2 to the first value, right, to give you 3. And it will add 3 to the first value to give you 4. So by the time I do this and then I drag, I get an increment. So basically, the reason is this, or what really happened. Hold on. What the hell did I go into? Okay. All right. So basically, what just happened there is that if you have 1, that's your first value, and then you select just 1, Excel assumes the value before that one is nothing, is 0, right? So you use the regular number system, and then it adds, okay, 1. So it adds 1 to 0. The next value becomes 1 again, adds 1 to 0, and you keep getting 1. But if you put 1 and 2, it looks at the most recent value and says and assumes that, oh, your first value is now 1 because your next value is 2. That's the logic there. So it begins to add the next value to the first value, which is 2 plus 1, 3, 3 plus 1, 4, 4 plus 1, 5. So there's how you're going to set your numbers. If you set it like 1, 3, 6, it begins to look at it. Okay, the first value is 1, the next value is 3. So it looks at the logic or the difference in that sequence and performs a little calculation. You get an increment like that. That's basically what Excel does. I don't know if I answered your question. All right, thank you. Mr. Ridon, please, your hand is up. You can ask your question.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. So I also asking about the final replace that you did.
Okay. Oh yeah, because I didn't show my entire screen, Abby.
Yes, I couldn't see how he went to.
Okay, let me okay. Let me show my entire screen again. I don't want it to be showing things. Okay, show my entire screen again, and then we'll do that find and replace just one last time. Okay, so if I go to, let me go to T. Let me just use a random cell. So let me type Abuja and then Lagos and then Abuja and then Lagos, right? So let's assume this set of values are, or this set of data, they are things we need for analysis. Now, it's consistent. If you want to, you see that we have 2 Abuja and 2 Lagos. So if you're visualizing your result, the number of Abuja and Lagos that we have, you're going to see that you're going to get 2 and 2. But let's assume that what we have, in Nigeria, we can decide to shorten this and call it ABJ, right? And then sometimes we call Lagos LAG, LAG, right? So there's a bit of an inconsistency with this data. Normally, Abuja means ABJ, so we know that. But Excel does not understand it. Our chart, our visualization will not understand it. Our pivot table will not understand it that way. So what it's going to see is going to see 4 different data. So what we're going to see is, if you're presenting your chart, you're going to see 1 ABJ, 1 Lagos, 1 Abuja, and 1 LAG. We don't want that. But then this can be a case of like a data that has 500 rows or 1,000 rows, and you don't know how to be locating each of these inconsistencies one after the other, then changing them or retyping them. So like I said, there are other methods, but the easiest method is to use the find and replace. So what I would just do is I'll come here or do Control F, but I don't want to do Control F. So you come here to find, you see find, but I want to replace it. So I'm going to do replace. Then I get a pop-up, right? So I'm going to come here. What am I looking for? I want it to, so I'll now choose the consistency or the convention I want. So I want it to be Lagos, not LA, not lag. So I'm going to find lag, LAG, and then I'm going to replace it with Lagos. So anywhere I see lag, I just replace it with Lagos. I just replace all, right? Okay. Now there's a bit of an issue. So in this case, what you're going to do is let's okay. All right. So we're going to find lag. Yes. Find lag. Okay, and then we're going to replace it with Lagos. Okay, so we're going to replace it with Lagos. Then I'm going to do the same for Abuja. So I'm going to come here, find and replace. I'm going to replace anywhere I see ABJ. I'm going to replace it with the app. I'm going to replace it with Abuja. So I want to do this. So that's basically what. But this is because we have just one selection. So if there are like multiple cases like this, you're going to see that, oh, this has replaced 10,000 selections, 500 selections, depending on how many of this inconsistency that you have. There are cases where you have things like United States, and then you have the US. This one is very important. This one is very common. If you're working with most international data, come across this a lot. So you just basically come to find and replace. Come to replace. What am I looking for? I'm looking for the US. Then I'm going to replace it with what? United States. Then I'll replace. And that's it. Right. So that's basically what we have. So that's the way you can handle find and replace. Okay, it's 51. Our time is really going. All right. So I hope that was clear. Any other question? So that we can proceed to at least we can finish up what we have for today. Any other question? Okay.
I was asking if you must you drag if your data set is up to 500, if the data you're entering is up to 500, 1000, do you have to start dragging from up to down? Is there no an easier or faster way of making it to correspond with other ones? That's my first question. Then my second question is to do for the eligibility. Can we calculate using grade? Do you understand?
Yeah,
Like using the grade. I want to see how your instruction will be like. I want to see how you make the instruction using the A or B, something like that.
Okay, no, you mean the grade?
Yes, can you
right?
use grade to mark for eligibility?
Now it most likely will not work because it's not a value. Now the grade is a text A. Now, I don't know if you understand. So you cannot perform a logic or a conditional function on like A. You cannot say if this is I don't know if you get. So you cannot perform an operator like equal to, plus, greater than on a text. You must work on it on a number. So it's easy to calculate. So if you want to do that, it's best for you to use the maybe total score or the attendance.
Okay.
Okay, then about your first question. Yeah, it's possible. I'm sure there are other ways, but the one I'm familiar with is just for me to hold and drag. That's the most common or the conventional method in which I do. It's faster that way. I'm sure there are shorter methods you can use to highlight or perform an operation on an entire column if it's large, right? I'm not sure how they do that, but dragging is one I'm familiar with, right? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Somebody said if this can be done using phone. It depends. Yeah, yeah. If you're using your Google Sheets on your phone, on your browser, and it's in desktop mode, sure, why not? You can. I think so. I'm not sure, but I think you can. If you're using WPS sheets, you can. It's going to be tricky, but I recommend using a PC. It's really going to be tricky using a phone. I don't know if I answered Katrina's question. Let me tell that question. Okay, somebody said, okay, no, okay, I've answered that one. Okay, so that's, can see more hands are up. Please, if your hand is up and you have a question, unmute your mic and ask, please. I just have 2 more minutes and then we move to the next thing.
Yeah, so I want to make inquiry, like I want to ask about maybe when you have a data set for that consists of maybe monthly payment or monthly contribution, let me just do it that way. And you want to find a particular person name, how do we get that? And how do we
What?
filter or know that, okay, this person for this so month, did he or
Mm.
she make payments for that
How do
month?
you-
So how do we
Repeat your,
get,
repeat your question, please. I didn't.
like, I mean, for maybe for an organization whereby the staff or workers in that organization are making a
Yeah.
monthly contribution or monthly
Mm.
deal.
Yeah.
So he wants to find a particular person name
Mm.
or and know that if he or she has made maybe more payment for January or February, how do we find it? How do we get it without you scrolling down to search for the name?
And okay, if I get you, I mean, the easiest thing I just do, let's say I'm looking for a particular student. Maybe I know the student's name as maybe, I don't know, John, right? And I want to know if John passed or failed. I'm using this data, for example, now. I'll just use my find. Okay, let me share my entire screen so that you see what I'm doing. So let's say I'm looking for a particular student, John, that is in one department. I want to know if the student passed or failed, right? So I'll just use my find. So I'll just do Control F or come to find. I'll type John. Sorry, I'll type John, and it take me to I've seen Ada Johnson. It's not Ada Johnson I'm looking for. I'll look for find next. I've seen John Mark. So let's say it's John Mark I'm looking for. With John Mark now, I can now see that, oh, John Mark is a male in computer science at 200 level with an attendance of 95%, with a CA score of 19 and exam score of 80. He got an A and he passed, so he's eligible. So that's one way. I mean, from the question you asked, if I understand it right. So that's how you can locate that. You can just find, if you know the name, You just use it as a reference. If you know the person's maybe staff ID, you can use that staff ID as a reference. So let's say I'm looking for a student with ID of 20. So I'll just come here and say ST0020, and then I'll find ST020, and this is S, so it gets to locate it for me here. And I see that ST020 is Daniel Hope, a male engineering at 200 level. So that's how one of the easier ways you can do it. So
Thank you very much, man.
all right, I hope that was clear. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Questions. We're running out of time. I'll take one more question. The fastest person, please ask your question.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Welcome.
Okay. My question is, while you were doing the calculation for the CA, with the exam score, you use two formulas, like you did it two ways. Can you
Yeah.
recap the two ways you did? Yeah, please.
Okay. So this is what I did. So what I did was the first one is an operator method, and the second one is the function method. So the operator method I did was I used equal to. Let's say I want to add the exam score and total score. Exam score is at H, total score is at I, and it starts at 2, right? So I'm going to do equal to H2 plus I2. That's what I'm going to do. And when I hit enter, it gives me the results, right? I want to, so that's the first way. Now the second one is to use the sum function. So equal to sum. So with sum alone, Excel already understands that I want to add. So I don't have to use plus again. What am I trying to sum? I'll just put the first value. I want to sum H2, and instead of using plus, I'll use comma to separate it, and I2, and then I'll hit enter. I get 58. So those are the two methods doing it.
So what do you
I
call
don't know.
the method again? The
The
first
first
one
one I
is
said is an operator method, the use of an operator, the plus addition operator. The second method is function method, the use of the sum function. So the difference is that in the first one, I'm not using this function called sum. In the first one, I'm using an operator called addition. This. So that's the difference. So let's see. Okay. Oh, I think I just figured out how we can do. So was it who asked me a question about how without dragging the easiest way to fill up functions? Somebody asked me that earlier.
Me, oh, it's me.
Oh yeah, so I think I just figured. So in the hold on. The best way to do it is, so I just tried something, man. Interesting, it worked. All right, so let's try something. Okay, so this, let's say we want to apply it for this total score. Let's try this one here now. I'll just see. Let me paste it here, right? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it here. All right, so let's say I want to perform the same operator. Let's say sum of H I2 and I2. So I get 158. So I'm summing exam score and total score, I get 158. So instead of dragging, if I drag it, I get a result, right? But instead of dragging, I can just do, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and then click on the last point I want. So you can do that by holding shift. You hold shift and you click on the last point here. So everything gets selected. Then you press Control D. So Control D gives you all of the results that you need. Hope you got that.
Sir, Control D or Control G?
D, like D for dog. Control D. So that's one shortcut to do it. All right, so I really advise that we proceed. All right, so like I said, we divided into 3 phases. Let me share just the screen so that. So I'll take questions when we're done, right? So we can proceed. Okay. Okay. So like I said, we divided it into three phases. Now the first one we're done with our data. So we have what we need for our visualization. Now the next thing is for us to handle our pivots data. Now the pivot data and pivot table is very important because it helps you to, I won't say aggregate your data. If you want to visualize, it's easier for you to just, yeah, it's easy for aggregation. Yes, that's what I wanted to say. So it's easy for aggregation, right? So we want to get the total student that we have, the total exam scores, the average score of a student, the attendance, all of that. We cannot be creating separate tables for those results. So the best thing is for us to create a pivot table for it, right? So that's what we're going to be doing next. So now the next thing is for us to move. So now we're going to create, like I said, this below this point here, we're going to see a bar. We're having sheets. So I'm going to rename this. I'm going to rename this to let me call it raw data. Right. And I'm going to create another sheet called let me rename it and call it pivot data. And let me call the last sheet let me call it our visuals. So this is the last point. Right, this is what we have, right? Now, what are we? The question is, what are we trying to visualize? That's very important. What are we trying to visualize? Now, the next thing is for us to visualize our number of male students that we have, a number of female students that we have, the number of programs, how many students are enrolled in a particular program. So all of those things are what we are trying to get, right? So now how do we do that? We do that by using the pivot table. So the pivot table is where is in the insert tab, pivot table. But in order for you to insert a pivot table, you have to connect that pivot table to your particular data. Because if you insert a pivot table without connecting it to your data, then that pivot table exists on its own. So it's not going to be connected to your data, right? So we want to do that by applying the pivot table. So I'm going to go to let's go to the pivot table here. If you go to insert here, you're going to see insert pivot table, right? So instead of manually handling things like the program, handling gender, handling number of students that passed or failed, handling eligibility. We want Excel to handle that automatically for us. So that's the reason behind the use of pivot table, right? So I'm going to create the pivot table. I'm going to click on the pivot table. If I click on it, a pop-up would come out. Let me confirm if that pop-up is showing. Okay, it's not showing. I have to share my entire screen again. Oh boy, this is exhausting. Okay, so all right. So I'm going to create my pivot table. I'll come here on the pivot table, and then a pop-up comes up, right? But remember, before this, I have to select my data. So which data am I working with? You see that it tells me select a table or range, but I want to do this before. So I'm going to come here and I'll select my entire data. No, I don't want that. I want my entire data to be selected, right? So the data that I want, right? No, I want to start from here. Okay, so this is what I want to be selected, right? So if I highlight all of this data by clicking Control A, I'm going to come to Home, Insert. I click on Pivot Table. See that it shows Table 1 because my table here is called Table 1. I can rename it to anything I want, but I want to leave it as Table 1. We've selected it. Now, where do you want to store your pivot data or your pivot table? In a new worksheet or in an existing worksheet. But remember that we've already created a sheet called pivot data. So I'm going to click on existing worksheet. Now, where is that worksheet? I'm going to locate that worksheet by, I can either type the name pivot data, but I don't want to do that. It's an exclamation sign. So that is very tricky. So I'm going to click on pivot data. See that pivot data gets selected. So it means that that worksheet is selected. But now where the next thing is, in my worksheet called pivot data, where is my pivot table going to be located? In what cell is it going to be located? That's the next thing, because without it, you cannot create a pivot table. So I'm going to come here and select A2. So it's at A2, and then I'm going to click OK. So my first pivot table is shown. Now remember that I'm creating pivot tables to handle certain things. Now what are those things that I'm creating pivot table to handle? I'm creating pivot table to handle gender because I want to see how many male students versus female students I have in the school. I'm creating a pivot table to handle things like programs. So I want to know how many students are in a particular department. I'm creating pivot tables to handle things like the total score. I'm creating pivot table to handle the level of the students. So all of those things that have category, those are the things I'm creating pivot tables for, right? So let's start from the very first one. Now, the first one that we're going to be doing here is the gender. Right? Now, two things exist and are very important in your pivot table environment. Now, the pivot table fields, very important. Now, this is where you select. So, because we have connected our pivot table to our actual raw data, it picks all of our header names. These are all of the header names that we have. We have student ID name, gender, program level, attendance, exam score, total score, grade, status, and eligibility. We have all of that existing in our table. Now, we have certain areas here, but the most important thing is rows and values. Rows and values. This is very important. So everything you're doing is rows and values. So like I said, we are starting with gender, right? So what are we looking at? What will our row be and what will our values be? Always remember that your value will always be something that contains measurable values, measurable data, a data that you can measure, something that can be counted, something that you can count. That's where values will always be. So I want to get the count for male and female students in this institution. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to come to gender, right? And I'm going to drag gender to rows. And I'm going to drag student ID to values. So with this, it will count how many female students I have and how many male students I have. Now this has been done. I don't have to write any formula, as the case may be. I've done the first pivot table. Now the second pivot table I'm going to do is for programs, right? So I'm going to come here, right? And I'm going to go back to my data and click on insert pivot table. It has already selected it. I'll come to existing worksheet just like what I did before. Select pivot data, select this particular cell that I want. You can choose any cell of your choice. I'm going to click OK. A new pivot table 2 is created for me. So it's creating it pivot table 1, pivot table 2. I can try to rename these pivot tables if I want. So like I said, I'm dealing with programs now. So I'm going to put program in my rows, and then I'll put student ID in my values. So I want to know how many students are enrolled in a particular program. Now, by doing this drag on top, I can see that I have 10 students in computer science, 11 students in engineering, 10 students in law, and 9 students in medicine. Now, imagine I had data set of about 80,000. I remember a job I had 2 years ago. We're working on a particular project and we're supposed to analyze the data for it was a hospital data for a disease. It was like, I remember the rows was about 18,000 rows, and we're supposed to merge it with another one that had like another 25,000 rows. So imagine that kind of data, that data set. You cannot count the categories that exist. But with the help of pivot table, you just, the moment you drag any category to rows and the value of that category to your values point to just help you count individually, separate the categories as you want. So that's basically what we've been able to do. Now, the next thing is for us to know how many students failed or passed, right, in our school, right? So what are we going to do? I'm going to create another pivot table. Come here, come to insert, create a pivot table, insert a pivot table. It has already selected that, oh, I'm working with table 1, which is my raw data. I'm going to come to existing worksheet, and then I'll select pivot data worksheet, and hold on, I want to put it here. Go to choose G2, and click OK. So a new pivot table 3 has been created. But what am I looking for? I'm looking for the number of students that passed and the number of students that have failed. So what am I? In my rows, I'm going to go to status because I want to know if it's pass or fail. In my status, we'll go to row, and then I'll come to student ID. Right. So now with that student ID to check, okay, for this particular student, what did this student get? Did this student pass or fail? It will now count it, aggregate it, and give me the result. So I have 4 students that failed in my school and 36 students that passed in my school. Which one should we look at again? I'm thinking we should handle total score. Okay, let's total score based on program. All right, let's try that one. I can come here and do something called the average score. So I'll go to back to my raw data, I'll insert pivot table, I'll click on existing worksheet, would locate it at pivot data, and then I'll put it here, and then I'll click OK. So I want to know the average of student score. So I'm going to go to for each particular program, what's the average of the total score that they got for the total number of students that they have. So I'll put programs here, and I'm going to click on total score. Right, so total score, right? So for students in computer science, they had a total score of 753, but it's too much a large number. So I don't need that. What I need is the average, right? So I'm having sum of total score. So I'll come here. There's this drop down here. If you click on this drop down, you can edit word value you have in that particular field. So I'm going to click on value field settings, and I'm going to select if I want to sum it, count it, get the average, get the maximum, or get the minimum. Now let's try something. If I do the average and click OK, so I get the average score of the students in computer science, the average of the total score. If I come here and then I do minimum, I'm going to get the minimum score for the students in computer science. So that's basically what you can perform filters here, but I'm working with average, so I'm going to stick to average. All right, so that's what we have. Now the next thing we want to look at is let's see if we can work with one last one. Thinking. Oh yeah, remember there are levels there, level 100, 200, 300, and 400. So we can know which student is in which level. Okay, let's see what we can do there. So I can decide to come here, insert a new pivot table, right? Come to existing worksheet, click on pivot table. I'm going to put that pivot table here and we'll say okay. Then let's see level. Let's select level. So we have level should be in rows, and level based on attendance. Let's try that one. Let's see if it works, because we've not worked with attendance. Let's see level based on attendance. That's the count. So sum of attendance for 100 levels. So the 100 level students, their attendance summed up to 700 and I don't know. But we're looking for the average attendance. So I'm going to come to visual field settings and then average. Exactly. So in percentage, 72%, 81%, 77%, 81.2%. So that's what we have. So let's stick to these ones for now. So that's basically what we are doing with pivot tables, and that's what pivot table is all about. What pivot table is doing here is helping us aggregate our data. Some of those things that you'd have calculated, that you'd have counted for, is actually, you don't have to do that, to just help you aggregate them, because it's from here that you create your visuals. Now we're getting to the very important part of all of this, the dashboard or the visual part. I'm sure everybody was still following along. Just carefully follow along with me, and then would you get it. It's not really hard. It's very simple. Now the next thing is for us to create our dashboard. Very, very important. Remember, I created the raw data, the pivot data, and the visuals. Now this is where you interpret your data for your clients, or for your, I don't know, for people to see and understand what is really happening, right? So I'm going to create something called, let's call it I don't know, what should you call it? Students, our school, I don't know, our school data, no, I don't know what to call it. Our school students, student performance dashboard. I don't know. Let's just call it anything. Okay, right. So I'm going to select these, and first of all, I'm going to merge. Let's merge these cells. So I'm going to select from here to K. So I'm going to merge these cells, right? Then I'm going to this. I'm going to sorry, it's supposed to be. Let me center. Maybe center. No, not gonna work. Okay, good. So we've center aligned it. So this is going to be our heading. So I want let's manipulate the bit. Let's change the fonts to this. Let's make the text I don't know, rainy. Okay, no. Okay. Let's increase the fonts to 18, and then we can. Okay. So this is what we have. So this is a student performance dashboard, right? It's interesting, right? So we want to create some things, right? Things like our KPIs and then our visuals. Now you're going to see how it's easy to create visuals with pivot tables. We're not going to have all of the issues we used to have when creating visuals. So the first KPI we want to create is the total students that exist in our school, right? Total students. So let's come here. Let's leave it here. So let's call it the total students. So the total students that we have here is we're trying to count it. So let's say count. Let's see. Count A. That's count all non-empty cells, right? Now, what are we counting? We want to reference our data. Remember that our raw data is at table 1. So I'm going to say count at table 1. At table 1. Then what are we counting? We're counting the student ID, right? So now in table 1, you're calling a column. A column is always in square brackets. So I'm going to say student ID, this drop down here that we have, student ID. That's what we have. So I'm going to close the square bracket and then close the parenthesis. And then so it goes back, it references our raw data, and then it counts the number of students that we have. And it has given us that we have 40 students. That's the first one we've done. Total number of students. That's what we've done. I can decide to do this. Let's try something very interesting. I can decide to say no. Let's see. Let's try something. If this will work. Let's see. Okay. No, it doesn't work. I don't know. Okay, so we have 40, right? Then the next thing we are going to be looking at is the score, the average score of the students in the school, right? In the school. So what are we looking at? We're now going to get the average of the total score. So we have the total score of students. We've not calculated it, but we want to get the average of that total score. So this is interesting because we don't have to calculate the total score. It automatically does the calculation for us and then give us the average. So we're going to say equal to the average. God, did I just do? The average of, remember, we're referencing our raw data, which is called table 1. Of table 1 is table 1, and then we're referencing the total score in the table 1. So if you go to our raw data, we have a column here called total score. That's what we're trying to reference. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to reference that column. So you're going to even see it here, this column here, total score. And then I'll close my square bracket, my parentheses. When I hit enter, I get 75.375. So that's the average score of the students in the school. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to see if we can get the number of students that passed and the number of students that failed. So that would be like our KPIs for this institution, right? So we're going to get the number of students that passed and the number of students that failed, right? What we're trying to do, we're going to start by saying, let's count. But in this case, we're going to be counting. Hold on. we're going to be counting conditionally, right? So we're going to count if a particular student passed or a particular student failed. Remember, we're referencing our table. So I'm going to say table 1, which is what we're referencing. And in that table 1, we're looking at the student status, if they failed or passed, right? So I'm going to click on student status. Oh my God, what did I just do? Hold on. Okay, student status, right? And in that student status, I'm going to close the column. And then in that student status, what am I looking for? Number of students that passed. So I'm going to reference something called pass, right? Reference this, and then I'll close my bracket. Very important. Sorry, this is crazy. Okay, then I'll close my bracket. So I have 36 students that passed. So to go back to our raw data and then count it from. Now I want to do the number of students that failed. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to count conditionally. Count if. Remember, I'm referencing my table 1. And in that table 1, I'm referencing the status column there. So in that status column, we're going to have something called the status, and we are going to see if we are going to call the students that failed, right? And then we're going to close this and hit enter. So we have 4 students. So these are our KPIs, right? So let's format these KPIs a bit. So you ask some questions like when we're done, eh? Let's increase it to 48. Let's come here. Let's use raw black. Let's increase it to 48. Let's do the same thing here. Raw black. Let's increase it to 48. So we'll do the last one. Then I shouldn't be doing this anyway, but let's change the fonts to raw black. Okay. So let's see. Let's format the bit. Okay. Let's format the bits. Let's format this one a bit. And then let's format this one a bit. Okay, so let's center this, center this, center this, and then let's center this. Okay. Now that we have this, and I like this color. Green, this color, this green, this color, this green, and let's go this green. So what we've done, we're done with our KPIs. So what it means is that in this institution, we have students with, this is a total, let's say, total students. Then we have the average score. Then we have past students. I mean, that's a long that there, but failed students. Nobody failed them, or they failed. Okay. All right. So that's what we have in our as our KPI. So that anybody that comes in and says, like, oh, okay. I was looking at I don't know, bloody columns and rows, and I didn't understand what was going on. But now looking at this KPI, you now understand what we're dealing with. Now that we're done with our KPI, the next thing is for us to create our chart. Now this is where it's getting more and more interesting. Now we'll go back to our pivot data. Very, very important. Very, very important. Now in our pivot data, we want to create our chart. So let's start with the gender, with the gender chart. So we're going to here, this particular one now, this gender. We'll go to insert. You're going to look for pie charts. Let's use 2D pie, right? 2D pie charts. We have it, 2D pie charts. We have, okay, let's create all of the charts here first before we begin to move. And then we want to create our program bar. In our program bar, we're going to click on the programs that we have, which is this pivot here. You're going to go to insert charts, and we're going to do a bar chart. No, not this one. A bar chart, 2D bar. So we have all of the programs here. And then we want to create if the student pass or fail. So we're going to click on this pivot here, and I'm going to click on insert, and let's use the do not chart. Okay, so that we can see distinctively. Right, then the attendance. I have something called, hold on a bit. The attendance, I think I missed that part. Hold on. Okay, let me copy this one. So now that I've created these charts, all of these charts, so we have number of students that have failed. I'm going to cut it, and then I'll come to my visuals and I'll paste it somewhere here. I'll come back to my pivot table, the number of students based on department or program. I'll cut it here, and then I'll paste it, I don't know, somewhere here. Go back to my pivot data, the gender, I'm going to cut it here, and then I will, I don't know, sorry, 1 second. I'll cut my visuals, and I'm going to paste it here. Right. So let's do one last thing. Okay, in attendance, let's go to insert. I'm looking for the best. Since it's attendance, I don't know, 4 data points. It's not plenty. Let's use line. Let's use line charts. Let's use line. Okay. And then for the, let's also use line in this case to no, no, it's not working. It's interesting. Okay, let's see. So this one is for, let's copy, let's cut this. No, let's cut this. I'll paste it here. No, I don't want this. This. What the hell? What did I just do? Okay. Let's cut this for the attendance. I don't need all of these visuals. Then I'll paste it. So let me work with this. So this is what I have. So I have my KPIs here. Let me increase this to this point. Increase this to this point. Increase this to this point. My God, this is getting bigger than I expected. Okay, so I'll just quickly arrange this. Okay, quickly arrange this one here, right? Let's see. Okay, then I'm going to come here. I'll just quickly come here and do this. So now basically what we're doing is just, I don't know, design, formatting, and editing. I mean, we're basically done. But it's not interactive. There's one last thing we'll do before it gets all interactive. So I just want this to be fine. I'm not much of a designer. Okay, this is interesting. Making progress. All right. So that's what we've done. Now the last thing we're going to do, not the last thing anyway, but I mean, ideally, the last thing is for us to make it interactive. So the last thing for you to do as a data analyst here is to make this to make it interactive. We want to make it interactive, right? So how do we make this interactive? by adding what we call slicers. So I'm going back, I'll go back to my pivot data sheets, and I'm going to click on something called, so I'll click on any of the pivot tables, and you should look for something called pivot table analyze. Pivot table analyze is very important. Here, if I click on pivot table analyze, I'm looking for something called slicer. So I'm going to click on insert slicer, and then I'm going to select, or not all, actually, not all. I just need slicer for, because I didn't do everything. I did for gender, I did for program. So you're going to do for the things you added as rows when you were creating your pivot table. So gender, program, level, and I don't know what else did I do. Status. Yeah, I think status. Those are the ones I have. Then I'm going to click OK. So I have all of these slicers added here, right? So to start, I'm going to do this, right? Bring it here. I'm going to come here. Bring it here. I'm going to come here. I'm going to come here. So that you see what I'm doing. So these are all of my slicers. All right. So yeah. But now these slicers, if you observe what I just did, before I created the slicers, I had to select just one pivot table. So it means that these slicers can only respond and interact with just one pivot table. And we don't want that. So what we want is for the slicers to affect all of our visual and all of our pivot tables, right? So I'm going to click on the slicers. We're going to see something called report connections. Report connections. Click on report connections, and I'll select. Remember, all my pivot tables are called pivot table 1, pivot table 2, pivot table 3, up to pivot table 5, I think. Yeah. So I have 5 pivot tables. So I'm going to select all of those pivot tables such that my my slicers would affect them. So I've done that for the first slicer. I'll come to the second slicer. I'll do the same thing, report connections. I'll select all of my pivot tables, and I'll click OK. I'll come to my third slicer, report connections. Remember to always right click. So I'll take questions when I'm done. Click OK. I'm going to right click on the last slicer. Then I'm going to select these, and these. Okay, so we're done. Now the next thing is for us to move these slicers to our visuals. So I'm going to select all of these slicers. So you hold Control and you click each of them individually. Then I'll cut it, Control X, and then I'll paste it here, Control V. All right, so let's start with gender. Let's start with gender. So I'm going to move. I'm going to move this slicer to where? So let me just move it here. Interest. Okay. Okay. All right. So we have this as our slicer, first slicer. We need to status if the student passed or failed. Let's put it here. The level. Let's put it here. The program choice. Let's see. Okay, so that's what we have. That's the last thing. Let's just see if we can format this thing a bit so it makes more sense. So I'm going to go to my view, and I'll remove formula bar and grid lines. Okay, so I'll come to insert illustrations. I'll go to shapes. I'm going to put background. I think I like a background in this. Let's leave the background as terrible. Let's I like the green color, right? So I like this green color. So I'm going to send, right click, I'm going to send it to back. Right. So this is what we want. Okay. Right. So I want this to have a background too of green. Yeah. And then I want this to have a gray background. I like me get a gray. I'm not a very good designer, so pardon my terrible color combination. All right. So that's what we've done. So this is what we've been able to achieve, right? So what it means is that it becomes interactive. If I select gender female, you see that I get only the video I get is just female students here. I get, oh, we have female students for engineering, female students for computer science, female students for medicine, and female students for law. If I select just male students, I have data for only male students. Male students that passed. In fact, basically, if I select female students in my pass, I have that no female students failed. But if I select male students in my slicer here, I have that some male students failed and some male students passed, right? You can see the count for the total points by male students. You can see the attendance trend for male students. If I select the two, so my data is back to normal. I select 200 level. In 200 level, you can see that these are the students we have for this program that are in 200 level, the number of students that passed for 200 level, just basically all of it. In engineering, you can see. So you can now manipulate your data, you can now explain your data. So if your result or your analysis, so if you're explaining it to people, they understand it because you're representing it visually, right? So that's what we've been able to achieve. And that's what you're going to do on your own when I give you an assignment, right? Then another way, you see that our KPI, if you observe, our KPI is a bit static, right? Is a bit static because the KPI is connected directly to our raw data. So if you click on the KPI, and sorry, let's show the formula bar. You see that it's coming from table 1, and table 1 is our raw data. Now let's try something. Let's add a new student. Let's add a new student. Remember, take note of this. We have total number of students 40. The average score is 75.38. Number of students that passed 36. Number of students that failed 4. Remember, take note of it. So let me select all of our, I don't know, everything that we selected before. Can use this. Can select multiple. Exactly. All right, so we're back. Oh my God. Because it's not selected. That's why. All right. So now this, remember, just take note of this data here as it is. Now I'm going to go back to my raw data. Let's see if this is interactive. I'm going to add a new student. So a new student just registered in our institution. And let's give that student an ID of ST041. And let's call that student, oh, I remember this name. Male. He's in engineering. Okay. I think he's in 300 level. And attendance, let's say attendance 94. CA score about 20. Exam score was about 45. Okay. got to be passed, eligible, right? Let's add a new student. A new student just registered. Let's call that student, give the student an ID of 42, right? Let's call the student Rejoice. All right. And then female. Let me see. All right. Then let's see law. 400 level. Attendance of let's see 80. No, don't come for me. It's just using it for an illustration. CA score 10. Exam score, let's say 10. Okay, so this is what we have, right? So we added 2 more students. Now remember, this gets interesting. Each time you enter in a new data, your pivot table would, the value in your visual would change. So you can see that we have 42 now. We have our average increases to 73.81. The number of students that passed now increased to 37. The number of students that failed increased to 5. It was 36 before and then 4 before. So we added 2 more students, 1 failed, 1 passed, and then we have that addition here, right? So the number of female students that we have, if selected, oh my God, if selected, now you see that there's an addition in law that was just added, right? So that's basically how, an interesting thing about it, that each time you enter a new data, now you no longer have to manipulate your visuals. Just keep manipulating your data, enter new data, remove data, and those information gets updated automatically in your, I don't know, your data, whatever it is, right? So that's kind of what we've been able to do. Right, so I don't know, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions. So I don't know if we understood what we just did.
Sir,
Yeah.
the visual, at the point it does look like maybe you are doing abacadabra.
No problem. I'll re-explain it if you want me to go back. Just ask your question. What exactly, where did you miss out? So the visuals, right?
So it's about the how you get how you arrive at getting the dashboard.
Okay. Okay. Noted. I'll explain that. Any other question? Anybody with challenge question? So that I'll go back to the visual, how I got the dashboard. Okay.
Okay, sir. Please don't ask the question.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, sir. Though my network is very, very bad. So I want to know how you were able to construct this pie chart and the rest of them, this graph.
Okay. All right. Okay. It's almost the same question as the previous person. Okay. All right. So now, remember I said that we divided this class into 3. Okay. Any other more question? I can see your hand is up. I want to take all the questions now so that when I start explaining, I don't have to come back to a few more questions. Okay, I don't think there are more questions. So now, I said we divided it into 3: the raw data, the pivot table, and the visuals. The raw data is this table that we have here, that we have our source data. So you might be in your place of work, in a bank, in a fintech, in a hospital. in a school where you have different types of data. So in this case, this is a school data set. It can be a financial transaction data set. It can be a hospital record or disease record data set. Regardless, it really doesn't matter. Now, this is what that data set can possibly look like. You're going to have rows and columns. Remember to always convert your data to tables. Sometimes the data, they already convert to tables by default. Most times, most data sets are already like that. But that's now when you're done, when you have this data, you're sure that you're not having missing values, you're not having inconsistencies in your naming convention, all of that, everything has been handled, right? The next thing is for you to handle, because you want to visualize, right? You want to visualize professionally. The next thing is for you to work with your pivot table. Very, very important. Pivot table in the sense that it's called pivot. So, like, what's the central point? What are you trying to see? So, the pivot table is the aggregation of your data. So, the things that you want people to see. Now, in my case, I don't want people to see name. I don't want them to see, I don't know, anything that is not here. I just want them to see that I have female students and male students. How many of those do I have? I want them to see how many programs I'm running in my school. I have 4 programs running. I want them to see the total number of students I have. I want them to see the total number of students that passed and the total number of students that failed. That will be my key performance indicator, my KPI, right? So, like I said, you will create a sheet, different sheet for it, and create pivot tables. These are called pivot tables. How do you create that pivot table? I'll explain using one more method. I want to create a pivot table. I'm going to select all of my data, Control A, all of my data here. I'll go to insert and click on pivot table. When I click on pivot table, it will select, the first thing is select a table or range. That table means your raw data, your actual data set that you're working with. So it will select, since I've already selected it before inserting the type pivot table, it automatically detects that I've selected a table called table 1, right? Now the next thing is, do you want your pivot table to be in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet? If you've not created this before, then choose new worksheet. But if you've created these 3 sheets just for ease, select the one that you want. Click on the existing worksheet. Select the one that you want, and it will select pivot data to reference that work for you. Oh, shit, I don't think you'll see my screen. Let me show the entire screen.
So we can see your screen. You can see
Oh,
it.
all right. I was
No, we haven't seen
yeah,
the top of my hand.
yeah,
It's showing
the
up.
pop-up the pop-up didn't show, right? Yeah, so I said that when you click on insert pivot table, this pop-up comes up where they said create pivot table, right? This pop-up here. You select a range, right? That range is what are you referencing? Your table, this raw data is what you're referencing. So that table range is called table 1. So I'm going to reference table 1, and then I'll finish with an exclamation. That's how I know that it's table 1 that I've selected. Then I'm going to click on existing worksheet. If I had already created these sheets here, else I'll click on new worksheet. If I click on new worksheet, then it automatically creates a new sheet for me. So I'll click on existing worksheet, and then I'll select this, and then sorry, I'm selecting this twice. Okay, right, and then I'd need to select a cell in that new worksheet. So I'll just select a random cell, and then I have this. Then I'll click OK. It's terrible. Hold on, let me start over. So insert pivot table, selected table 1. I'll click on existing worksheets. I'll locate that particular sheet, pivot table here. I'll select a column that I want, a cell that I want. Select this cell. This cell is selected, and then I'll click OK to create a new pivot table called pivot table 6 because I already have existing pivot tables before. So for that pivot table, anything I want to visualize, whether a KPI or a pie chart or a bar chart or a histogram or line chart, whatever it is I want to visualize, I'll do it here by dragging and dropping the required fields that I need. So let's say I want to do based on eligibility. So I want to know the number of female students to male students that are available, that are eligible rather. Should I do that? Oh, no, the number of students are eligible. So I'm going to come to eligibility. I'll drag it to rows. Remember, rows. And then I'll come to student ID because that's what I used to identify the student. And then I'll put it in value. So I have 25 eligible students and 15 non-eligible students. So I have this. I've answered the question of pivot tables and pivot data. Now visualization comes in. How do you visualize? You can either visualize inside of this sheet and make your work all messy, or you can decide to visualize in a separate sheet and arrange it properly. So I want to visualize the number of students that are eligible and non-eligible. I can use different charts. I can use a bar chart. I can use a pie chart, right? But I want something very interesting, right? So I'm going to select this particular pivot table here. See this one here, this one I want to visualize. I'll come to insert, and what should I choose? Let me use a pie chart for it. I'm going to use a pie chart. I can use a pie chart like pie to pie, or I don't know, pie to box, but I use a single pie chart. I click on this, or even a 3, I can use a 3D pie chart. Let me make it even more interesting. 3D pie chart. You can see that it now shows me a legend. I have 25 eligible students and 15 non-eligible students. I've visualized. So everything I did here in my this thing is just editing. I just rearranging color scheme, just arrange it so that it's fine and smooth and all of that. So when I'm done, I'll just copy this cell or cut it, as the case in there. Either right click, you're going to see copy or cut. I'll cut it and then I'll paste it here. I want to add it. I'll just come here and then I'll paste. I'll just paste it here. See, now it's added. So let me add it here. So I've added it here. It's now part of my visual. So as many visuals you want to add, you can just skip. Then my KPIs now. KPIs are like static values or cards that are there. The moment they see it, they know what it means. If I see total students, I know that I have 42 students in this school. I have average score of 73.81. I have the number of students that have passed in this school that passed their exams, 37. I can decide to add a KPI of eligibility. So I want to add, let's say, students that are eligible. Let me do that so that you understand how this visual works rather. So I'm going to come to this cell. Let me use this particular cell, for example, and I want to add eligible students. So I'm going to say equal to, what am I counting? I'm going to count if, remember, because I have eligible and not eligible. I'm going to count if, now I'm going to reference my raw data, which is the table 1. I'm going to say table 1. See, it selects table 1 for me. Now in that table 1, what column am I referencing? I'm referencing eligibility column. Eligibility. And then I'll close it. But in that eligibility column, what am I counting? I am counting eligible. and then I'll close this. If I hit enter, it will count the number of eligible students and give me the result. I hope I'm correct. Yeah, eligible students. It will count the number of eligible students and give me the result. Right. Now, by the time I come here and do for non-eligible students, I'll come here, let me call this eligible students. So that's what it's called now. So the only thing I want to here is I'll edit this, make it increase the font size, change the font style, background color, make it green, just like the others, increase the size. That's basically what I did. So that's how you can design your dashboard to be even more interesting, more, I don't know, aesthetic, as the case may be. So that's what I did. So you do that for all of the other charts that you want. I don't know if I answered your question. So any other
Sir,
question?
how do you get the one beside the chart?
Okay, the slicers. You mean this? The slicers, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that should be the last thing I'll do this night. Okay, now in getting the slicers, this is how you get the slicers. Now the slicers are used for you to interact, to manipulate and interact with your tables, your charts, all of those. You see that as I click on the slicer, it changes, data changes and manipulates it, right? Now, how do you get a slicer? You can only set slicers in your pivot table sheet or your pivot data sheet. That's what you do. So in order to get a slicer, you select a particular pivot table, click on the pivot table, a particular pivot cell, go to pivot table analyze. Pivot table analyze. You click on pivot table analyze, you're going to look for something called insert slicer. Remember, the name is called slicer. So I'm going to click on slicer, and you don't select everything. You don't add slicers to everything. You select slicers based on the row labels. Remember, based on the row labels. What do I have as my row labels? I have row labels as gender. I have row label as program. I have row label as status. I have row label as total score. I have row label as attendance, and I have row label as eligible or not eligible. So I'm going to select the full. I will select gender. I have program. I have level. Yeah. I have attendance. I have eligible, and then I have status, pass or fail. So when I click OK, I don't think you're seeing that pop-up, right?
Not at
Let
all.
me show the pop-up again. Okay, let me start from beginning. So like I said, when you click on pivot table analyze, you're going to click on slicers. If you click on slicers, you get this pop-up here. This pop-up, you select only and only rows that you've used to create your pivot tables. So in this case, we created the row called gender here. See gender, we select gender, program, the department, we selected it, the status or grade, status if they passed or failed, we selected it. We have eligibility here, we selected eligibility. We have the average total score. So we have the level here, so we select level, and then based on attendance, the okay, I think that's what we have. Program, yeah, okay. So those are the ones we select, and then I'll click OK.
So you
All of
haven't
those.
select attendance.
Okay, yeah. If you want to add that too, no problem. Still select a particular pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, insert slicer, and just select attendance. If you add attendance, you click OK. It's added for us, right? That's what we have. But remember that we selected just one pivot table. So this slicer, it's only connected to that one pivot table. So it only manipulate that one pivot table and the particular visual attached to that pivot table. So what it means is that this particular slicer can only be connected to this visual here that has gender, because when we created the slicer, we used this gender as our reference. So in order for our pivot table to affect everything and every visual or graph that we have, you come to each of the individual pivot tables. So I'll right click on this one, I'll go to report connections, and I'll select all of my, so these are already selected, they are all selected already. I added a new pivot table, so I'll add this. Now, this new pivot table that I just added, I'll right click on it, report connections, and then I'll check all the pivot tables so that it will manipulate all of the data that I have in my visual. That's the way you do it. And then when you're done, you can copy and paste it, or cut and paste it in your visuals sheet, right? So that's basically what we've done today, and we've been able to do an interactive dashboard where you can manipulate values. You can select, unselect, as the case may be. How many students are passed, 100 level, 200 level, 400 level students. We have this 100 level, and then you have computer science students, law, and medicine. So all of this data is just there, and we're manipulating it. You can present, give insights, and all of that. So that's what we've been able to do, right? We've kind of exceeded our time by 9 minutes, although we started slightly late. So that's what our lesson for today is or was, and I hope we understood it basically to some extent. And if you have any questions, if you have any confusions, you can always come to my DM or ask your questions. Like I said, I'm not teaching you data analysis. It's just part of the module that is part of our curriculum, so that you understand how you can be productive with, when you're given big data, how you can manipulate this big data and solve certain problems and get insights from these data, right? So this is going to be our last class for this particular module when it comes to data analysis and productivity, right? So now we are at the second month of our program. So I'm supposed to be submitting assessments by the end of this week. So I'm going to drop the assignment. Today's assignment, I didn't drop an assignment for us last time. I did drop an assignment during the class, but I didn't drop in the group. But this particular one, I'm going to drop it in the group. So we're going to, I'll drop a data set, and we're going to use either Google Sheet or Excel to create our own dashboard, right? That I'll use that one to grade us, so that I'll send in the scores and our grading to NITDA, right? So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask your questions or reach out. I'll try. It's always hard and difficult, but I'll try to respond to all questions. Right. So do have a wonderful evening. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night.
Can we get this spreadsheet?
For this file, okay, I'll drop this file. I'll drop this file now in the group. I'm doing that now. Let me save it, and then I'll just do that now. Okay. 1 second. Okay, I just sent it to the group. You're going to see an Excel file called interactive student datasets, XLS. So that's the file for today's class. So you can use it as a reference for, I'll drop the assignment this night, hopefully. I'll drop a data set that we can use. No, in the morning, you could have prepared the data set for your assignment. So I just dropped it on the group. Okay. All right, so that's it, and have a wonderful evening. Till we see, we have our next meeting on Monday, same time, same venue.